kick off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got the best, yeah. And even though the boss of government's. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you for coming out tonight. First of, as you'll probably be aware, 2 public sessions we've got. Certainly acknowledge elected members that are here as well, our CEO, our staff, and everybody. There might be a small audience here, but we'll certainly present the full picture to you. In welcoming you here, I certainly acknowledge that we are meeting tonight on the traditional lands of the Bundjalung people, and we thank them for the use of their land. And it is with pride I acknowledge, on everybody's behalf, elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders people that might be here tonight. I'll keep my part very brief because Justin's going to lead you through the budget. Although now that the mayor's up, nobody can tell me to get off. I would just say that you may disagree with what you hear. You may have other priorities you think council should be looking at. All I would ask you to do is don't please use phrases like cut the waste, because we don't budget waste. People often say that as an easy way out. Just cut the jobs, live within your budget, like we do with our own households. Unfortunately for a council, that's very difficult, because in Wyler's case, we still have a city designed for 50,000 with all the infrastructure that needs updating or maintaining. We've got 30 odd playgrounds, and people would like to see a lot more in those playgrounds. You may have issues and projects you would like to see elevated. All I ask you to do is keep in mind that the only way you can cut rates, as some people would like, or tighten the budget, is to cut services and cut projects. So if you've got different ideas, please put those forward, but always look at an alternative. If you want something added to it, we've then got to find somewhere within that budget that it comes from. So it's a very difficult job balancing. We will never satisfy, no council ever satisfies everybody, because everyone has different views. But even though it's a small audience here, do look forward to Justin's presentation, and certainly being a small crowd, make the opportunity to ask as many questions and raise as many issues as you'd like. Justin.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Lots of familiar faces here. It's good to see a couple of people that were here last year. Same purpose is to commence discussing with the community our draft annual business plan and budget for the coming year. What I'm going to do, next slide please, Grant. I'm going to essentially go through 3 components tonight. First one is going to be reasonably quick. It will be just a bit of a quick check-in with all of you in terms of our city, what's going on around the place, the services that councils provide. The second section is probably the most important component. That's where we'll talk through the budget considerations. And if you think of the scales, we always have on the one side services, projects and expenditure. And on the other side, we've got the question of rates and how do we fund those services. And councils, particularly elected members' role is always the really challenging one this time of year is around trying to determine what is the right balance in terms of what services we provide and how do we fund those. And the last bit is around the consultation process and how you can help shape or influence council's decision making and what the timeframes are. Next slide. All of you will know we're about 4 hours drive from Whyalla, 40-minute flight. We are the second largest city in the state outside of Metro Adelaide. So Mount Gambier in the south of the state has got a population of about 28,000. In the north of the state, Whyalla is the second largest city with a population of about 22,000. We are a city, as the Mayor just mentioned, that was designed back in the day to support a much larger population than what we've got at present. And it's one of the challenges that we live with now, that a lot of the infrastructure that we have in place here was built for a population of expected to be in excess of 50,000. And for the last probably 3 decades, we've had about 22,000 people trying to maintain that asset base. So it is a challenging starting point. One of the key things that I do always want to get onto the table very early in these discussions is that little blue box in the middle there that says CEFA. For a lot of people, that will mean absolutely nothing. So CEFA is a index. So if you think of CPI, which most people are familiar with, the ABS publish the CPI every quarter that measures a number of things. They produce a whole heap of different indexes and the like. One is called CEFA, and that's the measure of socio-economic either advantage or disadvantage. For Whyalla, our CEFA index, which measures things such as home ownership, employment status, income levels, education levels, access to the internet. So a whole heap of socio-economic indicators that indicate how well individuals or a community are tracking versus others. Our index is 883, which is at the low end of the scale. What that means is that our community is in the top 10 most disadvantaged communities in the country, not just this state, but in the country. So we are very mindful as a council that we've got a lot of people in our community that may have challenges, whether they're physical, mental, employment challenges, and that all contributes to this level of socio-economic disadvantage in our case. And we're very conscious then that how that then translates into capacity for community to pay for services. Next slide, please, Grant. This slide's a very busy slide. Those of you who have come for in previous years will have seen this slide multiple times. The purpose of this slide is really just to show how diverse the services offering is from our council. So all councils right across the state provide many services that are typical with local government, so roads, rates, rubbish, footpaths, libraries, playgrounds, etc. So like every other council, Whyalla City Council delivers those same services. But in addition to what is considered normal across local government, we also have a number of services that we deliver in Whyalla that are very unique to our council and local government area. So, for example, we own and operate an airport. It's not too many councils around the state that own and operate an airport. We also provide childcare services. Some may say, should we? And that's a subject we can get into a bit later, but currently and historically, we have provided childcare services as an important service to our community to support particularly skilled migrants that of the past coming to Whyalla to work, that their kids could go to childcare whilst they're at work. We also know that some people, vulnerable people in our community, need that childcare service or support to provide some respite so that they can actually get some time to themselves and have education being provided to their kids through a childcare service. We have a couple of marinas and a jetty, again, around the Eyre Peninsula. That's probably not that uncommon, but when typically we get into these forums, people will say, well, why are my council rates X in Whyalla, and if I lived in Burnside or Prospect or Unley or Salisbury, my rates would be much different. And part of the answer is around the services that we provide. Next slide, please. So if we now turn to the budget considerations, I mentioned the two sides of the scale. The first side of the scale I want to talk through is, what are the services we provide, which is largely reflected on that last slide. What is the service levels we provide? So service levels talk about what quantity or quality of services we provide. So all councils provide a library, for example. When we talk about service levels, you might talk about how many hours per day or how many days per week is the library open, for example. Some councils may only have a library open for 2 days a week. Others will have it open 7 days a week. So that's a different service level. So when we talk about ultimately how much do we spend in terms of delivery, some of the things that we'll talk about tonight is what services do we provide and what level of service that we provide. Over the next couple of slides, I'm going to go through what are some of the current things that are shaping or influencing council's decision, including an ASCOSA review, which I'll explain shortly, as well as Audit and Risk Committee. That's very much looking at the here and now. We've also need to think about the longer term, and a number of you in the room have been involved with the development of the WTF community plan for Whyalla 2030 and beyond. So that's thinking about how does next year feature or factor into a broader context. In that regard, what changes have we made to the long-term financial plan for this coming financial year compared to what we were talking to the community about last year? And how does that all get reflected in our strategic plan? And as it says there, what council has now recently adopted is a strategic plan with a two-stage future. And again, I'll unpack that a little bit more shortly. Just back one slide. Before launching into that, any questions just about that side of the business, the ledger? Any questions at this point? If not, I'll keep going. Once I get through a series of slides around our expenditure and services, we'll then stop and get some feedback or comments about services, and then we'll move on to the other side of the ledger, which is rates and revenue and funding. Next slide, please. So as I sort of just touched on, an annual business plan and budget is never developed in isolation. Council is always thinking about what has happened last year and the last couple of years that's brought us to this point. So what are some of the trends, emerging issues, emerging opportunities? But more importantly, what's on the horizon? And we always, as a council, plan for not just 1 year. Typically, we plan over a 10-year period, as we're required to from a legislative point of view. So things like long-term financial plans and asset management plans, given a lot of the services we provide and the assets that we deliver to the community are long-lasting assets, we look at that broader term. So the annual business plan and budget needs to be looked at in that context, and it's a constant continuum. Every year we have this sort of process where we revisit what happened last year, what's happening now, what's going to happen in the next few years, so that we continue to update our plans accordingly. Next slide. There's a lot of words here. I'm going to summarise it for you, for those that don't necessarily want to read. So with the last lot of changes that were made to the Local Government Act, about 4 or 5 years ago, when the Liberal government was looking, or Liberal Party was looking to get into government, one of the things that they were very much talking about at that time was rate capping and putting a lid on what councils could increase in rates. Through a long and arduous process, rate capping sort of fell off the table for good reasons. I won't get into the debate about that at present, but instead of rate capping, what was introduced into legislation was the requirement that all councils are subject to a financial sustainability review by ASCOSA. ASCOSA is the Essential Services Commission of South Australia. So ASCOSA is an independent body. They have review and audits done of things like utility charges, so electricity, power, aged care, now local government. So they've got a very broad number of services that they review, and their focus is all around the impact on the community from a social point of view. So ASCOSA have, and each council will get done once every 4 years, and our review was done late last year, or early this year. We got the report. Yeah. So we've had our review, not unsurprisingly, and not inconsistent with the conversation we've had with our community for the last few years. ASCOSA come to the conclusion that we are potentially unsustainable. And that word potentially is really important because it means that we could be unsustainable, or it could be that we've got an opportunity to not be unsustainable. So what SCOSA identified is that we've been running at an operating deficit for a number of years. We know that. We've been talking to the community about that. They identified that one of the biggest financial burdens on our council is our airports. Surprise, surprise. We know that. We've been talking to our community about that for the last few years. One of the really key focuses of SCOSA is around rate rises versus CPI movements. And basically, in short, if a council continually projects or is looking at rate rises above CPI, that raises red flags and warnings for SCOSA. And they say, if you're raising your rates or revenue more than CPI, that's an issue because the community is going to have challenges being able to afford above CPI increases. They identified that we have a lot of old assets, particularly buildings, that are not well utilised. Again, we've been talking to our community over the last 12, 18 months about the need to move towards shared services and mixed-use facilities, where in the past, every sporting club, every community group all had their own buildings and their own facilities. And the reality is that we as a council, we as a community, and those sporting clubs and community groups don't have the financial capacity to look after all of the buildings that we've got, particularly given that a lot of them are getting towards end of life. So again, nothing new and something that we have been looking at. And the last one is if buildings in particular are not being well utilised or delivering good public value, council should look at trying to divest themselves of those assets. So nothing particularly new. What is important though is that SCOSA review, together with the independent assessment that we've been getting through our audit and risk committee, we have 3 independent members on our audit committee. And as you would expect, the finance and audit committee is saying operating deficit, warning, warning, warning. You need to do something because you're constantly looking at operating deficit. So with those 2 things coming to the fore at the same time, council has made some changes to its plans, revenue and rate increases and its long-term financial plan, which I'll talk about shortly. But what it has done is it has informed the strategic plan, and with that 2-stage future, for the next couple of years, the council is more focused on trying to deal with its financial situation, do budget repair, consolidate, rationalise, get our house in order, basically, in readiness for the huge development opportunities that are on the horizon, and to put us in a position where we can leverage those better in due course. So that's sort of very much shaped the here and now. Separately, as I said, in terms of our planning process, we always look at, what's the future? WTF, for those who have been involved in the process. It was a good way of getting interest in what is normally not a particularly exciting subject for many. But we've been through a really rigorous process over the last 12 months, looking at the community developing for the first time a community plan developed by the community for the community. So this is not a council plan. This is many of the people within the community. Over the journey of 12 months, we probably had in excess of 500 people, sometimes the same people who have been to multiple sessions, but we've had 500 plus people coming around tables, butcher's papers, sticky notes, having conversations about what do we want Whyalla to look and feel like, and what's its form and function in 2030 and beyond. And that's really important because that's our community saying this is our aspiration for who we want to be, what we want our city to look like, and what we want to see and feel around us in Whyalla in the not too distant future and beyond. So the launching of that community plan is the subject of current discussions. We had a workshop 2 weeks ago, which was to start to look at empowering and encouraging everyone to do their bit to deliver on what the community is saying is important to the community. And this has definitely helped shape and inform council's budget, annual business plan, and also our strategic plan. So council's got a role to play in terms of delivering on some of those key elements, but so does SAPOL, so does church groups, so does the state government, so does big industry, small industry, etc. Everyone's got a role to play in terms of shaping what our future looks like. Next slide. So with a culmination of all of that, a couple of things that council has now done in terms of this draft budget and the draft long-term financial plan that we sit within is that we have looked at reducing some of our costs in the form of staff numbers. So we had already previously planned to have a reduction of 3.5 staff from next financial year. We've now brought that forward, so we've actually got a couple of staff vacancies now, which we're actually not going to fill. So we've brought forward some of those staff reductions and staff salary cost reductions. Over the 10-year period of the long-term financial plan, we've reduced the amounts of planned expenditure on new assets. Back to SCOSA. SCOSA said if you're unsustainable, you've got to spend money on your existing assets and maintaining the existing assets. Don't spend a lot of money on new assets because all you're doing is creating more responsibility in terms of maintaining and servicing more assets. So council has taken that on board and has pulled $10 million out over the next 10 years, which is a 50% reduction in our planned new asset investment. And we've also reduced our projected rate increases over the next 10 years by 7.3% to what discussions we were having and what we planned for this time last year. So these are some of the adjustments that have been factored in already. And then through this consultation period, we'll say, you know, does that look and feel right, or do we need to do more? And I'll pause shortly and give you the opportunity to contribute to those questions. Next slide. Two-speed future, I've already touched on. So our strategic plan is for a 5-year period. First 2 years, I've already talked about restoring financial sustainability, focusing on and delivering core services with a really strong focus on city amenity, which I'm going to unpack a little bit more because we know that's something that the community is particularly focused on. Continuing to look at investing in our foreshore precinct, so the foreshore master plan. So our long-term financial plan, our annual business plan is essentially delivering the core services with only a couple of projects, and the foreshore is one because we know that the community, having been through the master planning process, is really keen on seeing things like a splash park, a new foreshore plaza and the like. So I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. So very much first couple of years trying to get our house in order, get ready for what we know will come. Years 3 to 10, then as new revenue streams start to come online, which I'll talk about shortly, that then gives the opportunity for council to come back and reconsider. If we've got more money coming in on the one side of the ledger, which we haven't talked about yet, does that mean that we can start either doing more services, increase service level services, do more projects? There's a number of things that we can do. We've got more financial capacity than what we've got at present, but that's down the track. Next slide. This graph is a bit busy. Did we print off copies of this for everyone?
Yep, there.
Yeah. So a copy of this particular slide is outside near the tea and coffee. This is a really important slide and will help with our discussions because what it does is it lists all of the services that council provides. It says for the average residential ratepayer, so just click on you. What's your first name?
Kristen.
Kristen. So if Kristen's paying council $2,225 worth of rates, I'm hoping it's roughly about that, for his rate contribution, you can see $140 goes towards curbs and footpaths. Just under $140 goes to road maintenance, $60 goes to street lighting, etc. So we show how much of each person's rate bill goes to each of the services. The only service that isn't reflected in the horizontal bars is waste management, because that goes across the screen 3 or 4 times, because waste management is our biggest cost by far. So for the average rate payer, paying roughly $2,000, about $400 goes towards waste management. So it's our biggest cost. In the brackets on the left-hand side, as you're looking down, is what the staff FTE or full-time equivalents are. So this is a really good way of you seeing what money is being spent on what services and what amounts of council resources in terms of staff are going to each of those services. So when we then start talking about what services do we provide and what service levels, and there's a view that we need to do more over, we need to do more public art. If the view from the community is that we need to do more public art and we want to put money in the budget for public art, we then can have a discussion to say, well, what can we reduce or change in order to fund more public art? Next slide. City amenity is a really big focus of the council at present. We get a lot of customer requests from the community. There's a lot of Facebook and social media commentary around our city. We do have some wicked problems within our city. We have, unfortunately, a level of illegal dumping, which is not particularly helpful. There's a few examples there of illegal dumping. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. We had those last night. How much do we spend on the illegal dumping? 180.
Illegal dumping is 220.
220.
Yeah.
And hard waste collections is 180.
Okay.
So just to give you a couple of numbers, we currently have a contract with Bedfords to do hard waste collections. As a community and as a council, we pay $180,000 for them to do hard waste collections. On top of that, council spends $220,000 going around picking up the illegal dumping that happens in and around our city. So you can see those numbers start to grow very quickly in terms of scale. Next slide. I've touched on the subject of buildings. Many of our buildings are old. A good example of this is the former civic building on Darling Terrace. That was built in the 1960s, and council has operated out of that building for 56 years or something. Yeah. When that building was built, building standards, building materials were not the same as they are now. So that building got to the point where it actually was no longer a good investment of ratepayers' money trying to put band-aids or fix an old building that really was not going to serve the community or council very well going forward. Unfortunately, that's just one example of many. The infamous Beach Cafe, the closure of that. A lot of people will look at that and say, well, there's nothing wrong with that building. Why isn't it open now? I won't go back into the history. Short version is that building was not fit for purpose. It had a whole heap of food standards and DDA access and environmental concerns. So it was no longer fit for purpose, and we needed to close that. Unfortunately, the list just keeps going on and on. We've got soccer clubs, football clubs, dark groups, Canberra craft market people. We've got surf lifesaving clubs. We've got yacht clubs. We've got airplane lovers clubs. I'm not sure what they actually call themselves. Every club has got a building and a facility. We, as a council, have started to have a conversation with many of the community groups and others that lease council-owned buildings. Historically, we've ended up with a whole heap of mixed arrangements where some groups will lease these, pay for utilities, outgoings, do their own maintenance, and others don't. Some clubs pay $500 a year in some instances for prime real estate in our city, for the privilege of having a facility and using that facility, where another club will pay $10,000. So it's a mixed bag. It doesn't make sense. And in the context of the SCOs, feedback that we've got, we've started having a conversation with various community groups and with the community at large, saying that we can't continue to do what we've done in the past using the old Einstein theory. You know, clubs don't have the financial capacity. They don't have the volunteers to maintain their clubs or their facilities like they did, 20 or 30 years ago. We as a council don't have the capacity to continue to give some clubs access to a building at well below market value. So, $500 a year for a building in prime real estate within our city. We can't keep doing that, because all that does is just contributes to the challenges that we have as a city, community, and as a council. And so we have been starting those discussions with various groups. Some of the buildings are really at a point where they are no longer fit for purpose, and we need to stop using some of the buildings. I'm going to do it again. I did it this time last year, and the next forum we had an extra 15 people in the room, so we'll see how we go this time. But Pandera is a good example where they are very, very, very old buildings. And the question is, can we continue to use those buildings in the way that they're currently being used, given that over time the risk profile of those buildings is increasing, particularly when you think about things like electricity. When you think about what the electricity standards and electrical standards were when those buildings were done, fast forward and think about the degradation or decay of those electricity conduits and the like over, when were they built? 80, 90 years ago. Anyone who's got an old car or an old house will know that as soon as you start touching an old house or an old car to look at starting to renew or fix something, you then have to bring it up to current standards, and bringing it up to current standards means that you usually been having to pay a lot of money. So getting more community groups, sharing spaces, sharing buildings is very much our focus. We're looking at our leases and licensing arrangements, and we will be starting to have a conversation with more groups around paying a fair contribution towards the access to their buildings, and or more importantly, sharing their buildings so that we can get better use out of those buildings. Moving on, sorry, I probably belabored that one a bit too much, but current projects, as I said, our primary focus for next year is very much around the core services and delivering those core services. We've only got 3 projects specifically included in the budget. One is our Foreshore Master Plan. Hopefully some of you would have seen, some of the image on the left-hand side with a beach plaza, splash play area, potentially a new home for Surf Lifesaving Club and others. Noting my last comments about shared services. It won't be a Surf Lifesaving Club building. It hopefully will be a multi-user facility. We've still got some money in the budget to progress that, because we know that the foreshore is really our #1 priority project. However, the big caveat on that is that that's subject to significant external funding. So we've got a live application in with the federal government as we speak, has been there for a number of months now, for a multi-million-dollar contribution to this facility. If that grant is not successful, we're not going to be able to proceed with that, because our community just don't have the financial capacity to progress that. The top right-hand corner there is the Rec and Leisure Centre. The second project that we've got in is around installing some solar panels and improving building management and energy management within the facility. The important thing with that project is that putting solar panels on the roof of the rec centre, which we know is a big consumer of electricity, running all the pumps and for water and the like, that's putting the solar panels in will actually pay itself back within about 4 years. And then every year after that, we'll actually, as a council and community, save money on our power bills for that particular building by being able to use the solar and renewable energy as opposed to mains power. And at the bottom right, we've already previously committed to doing some refurbishment of the existing library building and some necessary plans, maintenance in that building. The additional project that we've added, that being the third project, is to install some new shelves and some new furniture to make the building or the library more flexible, so we can move furniture and shelving around, so we can create spaces for different community groups and activities to happen within that building. And the reason why we're doing that now is that we're doing the floor, for example. So whilst we're pulling everything out to do the floor, we're going to do the shelving and the furniture at the same time, and obviously makes sense that we then don't go and rip something up or damage something that we've just done by doing the shelving, 1 or 2 years down the track. Next slide. So I'll press pause there. So that's one side of the ledger. So that's talking about our services, service levels, projects, and what the current focus is. Any questions around any of those? Any particular services that you want to ask about? Yep.
We keep talking about the foreshore master plan, and the foreshore is lovely. The beach is almost unusable because it's just a layer of seaweed from one end to the other.
Yeah.
So who's in charge of managing that?
Yeah. That's an interesting use of words. Who's in charge of managing that? I'll respond by saying it's council's responsibility to do the work on the foreshore that's necessary. The entity that ultimately determines what work we can do is the EPA. And the EPA gets input from the Coastal Protection Board. So there's 2 state government agencies that says what council can or can't do on our beach. We have got a current and active program looking at how do we address the issue of the dust as opposed to sand that is blowing up off our beach, because over time what used to be sand is now very, very fine, so it's almost like a dust, and there's a number of contributing factors to that. But one of the things that we're actively working on at present is how do we do that dust/sand suppression to reduce the amounts of sand that is being blown up into that whole area. And the other piece, which is interrelated with this, to your point, is how do we prevent some of that sand shifting? And seaweed is a natural way of being able to control the movement of sand, both in terms of it shifting along the coastline and blowing. But I agree with you that what's there at present is not appropriate. So we are currently actively working. We've actually requested the EPA and Coastal Protection Board to come and actually visit us, because we've got people in Adelaide who know they've got an old beach and West Beach, and they're trying to give us advice without even coming and having a look at our beach and looking at the environmental context. So we've specifically requested them to come and review what we've been doing. So for many years now, we've been doing sand replenishment, and we've been doing certain things with our grasses or seaweed. And I think the collective view of many in the community is what we've got at present is not good enough and it's not working. So we have asked the experts to come and visit us. I don't know, Mayor, if you've heard of the day. Tomorrow morning. Oh, there you go. How efficient is the mayor? I wish I could do that. Tomorrow morning, we've got the experts coming to town. We've got a very, very good resource in-house. Unfortunately, not here today because she's got a bad headache. But our Director of City Growth, her background, so Dave Valentine, is environmental management and environmental science. So she is actually very good at being able to articulate to the experts, inverted commas, to say what you're telling us is not working, and we really want you to come and meet with us on site. Let's walk the beach. Let's have a discussion about what's working and not working so that we can put a different plan in place because what's currently happening is not good enough.
Yep.
So long way of saying yes, acknowledge that it's not
Yeah, I
the
mean,
way
you've
we
got,
want it to be, but
you've got
yes.
that access route for
Yeah.
wheelchairs or anyone else. And
Yeah.
it meets a 3 foot high major ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I can say, watch this space.
Yep.
It's not going to happen overnight, but we are actively working on it. It's the mayor personally has been down to the beach multiple times, meeting with residents down there, meeting with Jay. You're going to be in attendance tomorrow when the experts are here. Mayor will be in attendance tomorrow when the experts are here, so I'm sure the mayor will share your view and his view about what can be seen there at present. So yeah. Don't know what the answer will be, but we think we know what some of the answers are, but we want the experts to confirm that so we can start getting on with it. Other questions? Yeah, you go.
Look, we know that the deficit is like an inherited subject that's come across many councils.
Yeah.
And you've
Yeah.
got has landed on
Yeah.
this council.
Yeah.
And how they managing it, that's fine. My question is the council looking at resources outside where they can then encourage an income,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Apart from raising rates.
Yeah, so there's many examples I could quote. One of the ones that is, again, a work in progress at present is there is federal government money and there's a program called the Local Jobs Program. Its focus is on about how to connect workers and potential workers with jobs and employers. Sounds simple and it's a bit of a no-brainer, but when I talk about workers and potential workers, we know that there are many people within our community that didn't finish school, haven't done apprenticeships. In some instances, we've got generations where families have not had a job. So we've got, in some instances, some individuals that are going to require a lot of investment to start giving them some work skills, work hardening, to actually get them to a point where they can actually do a job. So the local jobs program is focusing on that, as well as how do we upskill or provide more training and development for the other workers that are already here and align that with the needs of the businesses in the industry that is growing. In the context of council, one of the things probably can't deep dive too much into tonight, but around that city amenity piece that I just talked about, with a bit more time, a couple of the other slides would be trees, weeds on footpaths, unsightly properties, and there's another one, I think. But there's a number of different things that we're looking at, but particularly weeds on footpaths, beautification of streets. We're looking at innovative ways of how we can get more done on our footpaths and in our verges and in our median strips that is not being done by council and requiring an increase in rates. That will be twofold. One will be, we'll be talking to the community about how we can get the community to do more themselves. So you can say, well, you want more trees planted, council, please go and plant some more trees. And I can respond and say, yeah, that's fine. I'll just increase the rates and I'll plant some more trees because that's what you told me to do. Or alternatively, is it the case that you can potentially plant a tree? Work in progress, so just bear with me for a sec. But to your point, that local jobs program I just mentioned, there's a whole heap of unemployed people or low skilled people that need skilling up living in our community at present. We're currently working with the federal government program to say, can we actually pull some of that money and resources down into our city and actually get people providing training, supervision and support for local residents to do more in our local community, and that's not paid by our residents through rates or being done by council.
Sure. So that's good. The other thing is to get more external money in is a lot more being done for tourism. Well, a lot of people don't want tourists here, and I can see that they've got a gem and they want to keep it to themselves.
Yeah.
But tourism, they generate so much income.
Yeah.
I think Europe, as an
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
if tourists stop going there, they'll all go broke.
Yeah, so on the other side of the ledger, shortly we'll talk about external funding and what some of the opportunities are. To I think the point that you're making, and you might say the foreshore master plan or the improvements on the foreshore is to both service the local community, so providing a great place for our locals to go, but it's also a place where tourists and visitors will go. And that's why that external funding in the form of the federal government money will be really important in terms of being able to support that public development improvement. So we have got a very strong focus on getting external funding. We're actively engaged with the state government on multiple fronts with everything that's coming, which I'll talk about a little bit more on the revenue side. The federal government has got a program called the Regional Precincts and Partnerships Program, bit of a mouthful. That comprises two elements. There's a grant program called Growing Our Regions, which is the fund that we've already got an application in for the foreshore. The second stream is what they call a precinct partnership program. And that's all about getting the three levels of government actually working together in conjunction with the private sector to do a program of work or activities that is going to be tailored for that particular location. With everything we've got in front of us, we think Whyalla is in a prime position to be going to the federal government and saying, here is the 25 things that we know needs to be done in Whyalla. Of those 25 things, and dare I say, I'll put the airports into that mix in terms of airlines and cost of maintaining the airport and getting people in from a tourism point of view. But on that 25 things, the state government has signed up to supporting us on 15 of those. And that support may be the state government saying, yes, they'll provide the land, and housing is a good example in this context. So when you're talking about getting externals to assist, we know that to support business and industry, more people coming in to try and address the issue that we've already got, being a housing crisis and prices increasing, we need more houses. Everyone knows that. I'll talk about the scale of that shortly. But the state government has got plenty of land in Whyalla. So as part of that precinct proposal, when we go to the feds and say we want amounts of money to do some planning and coordination across federal, state and local government, housing is an element. And by the way, the state government has said, yeah, here are the 2, 3, 4 sites that they will provide or support being developed in the context of that precinct partnership. That's a bit of that's the really big opportunity that's in front of us. But really big opportunities also require a really big effort and investment of resources. And back to that 2-speed, as a council, we've got very limited resources. We could be talking about, I'll just say, a multi-million-dollar investment in our city. Don't know what the number in front will be, but a multi-million-dollar investment in our city across housing, public amenities, reference core facilities, facilities for to support skilled migration, workforce development in our region. There'll be a whole heap of things that will be invested in Whyalla over the coming years. We'll package that up, but to package that up and say, here are all the things that we are going to commit to requires a lot of front-end effort. So it's a long way of saying that there's great opportunities. Yes, we're pursuing the external funding. Some of them are not going to be easy, and some of them are going to take some time. Hopefully others will hopefully just fall in our lap sooner rather than later. And I'll talk a bit about that with some of the developments.
Last one.
Yeah.
What can the community do to help this process?
That's a really good question. I'm going to take a bit of an academic response to that and say, community's already said what you want in terms of the future with the community plan. So my initial response is that every community member should be looking at that plan and saying, you know, what is my individual contribution to that community plan, and how can I influence or get collective impact and
Can we
collective-
get that message out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a little bit of an academic response. So there will be other more tangible things. Speaking to your local state member, speaking to the federal member, you know, writing letters to Parliament, providing support letters when council puts in funding applications. There'll be a whole heap of different things that the community can do in terms of trying to secure that external funding. As individuals, businesses will have a role, you know, in terms of creating apprenticeships or training opportunities or job skilling opportunities. So there's a whole heap of things that we all need to contribute to over time. So I know that's probably not a great answer to your question, but it's
Close.
yeah.
I mean, you're talking about investment
Mhm.
in return.
Yeah.
Is the council confident that what's still going to be here?
Short one word answer, yes. And what I might do,
We do it.
yeah, and what I might do, given that your question around future investments and tourism and those other opportunities sort of tips us over onto the other side in terms of the revenue side. So we might just keep going. We'll go to the other side of the ledger in terms of rates and external funding. And then again, I'll press pause and we'll have some further discussion. And I will come back to that question about the steelworks. No, I'll respond to it now. Think of the lessons learned through COVID, and particularly around sovereign security. Steel
Yes.
is a sovereign asset that will be protected by federal and state governments. So whilst the steelworks has got some challenges right here, right now,
Yeah.
I can give you a one-word answer that there will be steel produced in Whyalla in some shape or form into the future, because steel is critically important to our nation. The economic value to both federal government and state government from the iron exports and steel exports is significant. The amounts of emissions that are generated by steel production in particular, 8% of the global emissions in terms of carbon dioxide comes from the steel making process. So the whole focus on hydrogen and renewable energy, one of the main outcomes from that is to decarbonize the heavy and hard to abate processes such as steel production. You've got millions of dollars being invested into that by the federal government, the state government, the private sector. And yes, there's a lot of comments about, is Gupta putting enough investment in? Should he invest in more? I think we all probably say, no, it's not enough and we want more. Understand that, he's got a significant business enterprise, but my confidence in giving that one word answer that steel will be produced here is in that broader context. I don't believe that the federal government or state government, and even if Gupta himself, whatever reason, can't afford the investment in upgrading the very old steelworks, I would hazard to guess that there are probably people talking to the federal government about building a brand new steelworks. Steel is critically important. And the challenging thing, sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. The challenging thing is that because steel produces so much emission, and because steel production is expected to go up over the next 10 or 15 years, that increases the pressure in terms of that carbon footprint. So investment in steel production using things like hydrogen, magnetite, as opposed to hematite. We are, sorry, you've got me onto a little bit of a pet subject here. For those that haven't seen, we're the only place in the world, I'll just say that again, the only place in the world within a 50-kilometre radius, we've got all 6 ingredients needed to produce green steel and green ore, which is what the world needs. We've got steelworks. Yes, old and tired and needs investment. We've got a city that has heavy industry as part of our DNA. You know, if you talk, I'm raising this in the context that it's all very well to say, let's someone just build a new steelworks. Someone's not going to build a brand new steelworks in a greenfield site where there's never been heavy industry or steelworks before, because the getting the community and social license for that is really damn hard. In Whyalla, that's part of our history. It's part of our DNA. We've got the magnetite resource, which is a high quality iron ore compared to Pilbara iron ore. So in terms of green iron, green steel, better quality iron ore resource. We've got not one port, but two ports in terms of export to market. So Whyalla and Port Connington. What am I missing? Wind and solar resources, the best in the world, or second there too. We know it's very windy around this part of the world, and we also know we get a lot of sunshine. Those wind and solar resources are resources that money cannot buy, and we've got it in abundance in South Australia and particularly in our patch. There's the first five. The one ingredient that's missing at present is hydrogen. And it won't be long before
We've got plenty of that that's locked up in the water.
Yeah, yes. Anyway, sorry, I've gone off a bit of a tangent, but to give you a bit longer answer, why I'm so confident to my one-word answer, that's the context. Coming back to the revenue side of the equation, I'm going to talk through what is the impact from moving from site value to capital value. This is an abnormal year. It's going to be a really bumpy and challenging year for not only council, but for a lot of our ratepayers, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I'll just emphasise once, twice and three times during the course of tonight. Moving from site value to capital value does not deliver 1 extra cent of rate revenue to council. I'll say that again, not 1 extra cent to council, yet some people's rates will go up by 15 or 20%. So those people that says, well, my rates have gone up by 15%, council must be getting a windfall in terms of extra rates. That's not the case. I'll explain that a little bit further. Second item there is the increase in rate revenue. So separate to the subject of how we determine rates, which we have to do, we get back to that conversation about how much does it cost to deliver services and how much can our ratepayers afford to pay, capacity to pay. And we'll talk about specifically how much rates are we going up and how much extra rate revenue council will be driving. Some scenario planning. So there's been a lot of talk now. I feel like I've been treading the treadmill now for some time, talking about hydrogen coming and housing development coming. Many of you have heard me talk a lot about that over the last couple of years. I think the exponential curve is that we're now starting to get to the point where things are going to happen, and I'll explain that through the scenario planning. What are the impacts of CPI? The external funding question, which come up before, and rate release. So getting into it. So the first subject is the moving from site value to capital value. This was one of the changes that was made in the last to the Local Government Act. Whyalla was one of the very few councils left in the state to use capital values as the basis of determining rates as opposed to site value. Legislation requires now that all councils must use capital value, so it's the non-negotiable question. We can't debate it, we have to do it. Legislation says we need to do it. And this year coming, there's the last three councils will be transitioning to capital value, being Port Lincoln, ourselves, and Tumby Bay. What's the most of you or some of you have attended the forums that we went through in terms of talking about the rating methodology and the shift. For those that haven't attended that, if you think the way of best describing it is site value was largely determining rates based on the value of the land with no regard to what's sitting on the land, whereas capital value looks at the value of the land plus what's sitting on the land. So what the value of the house or structure is on the land. So if you think about up until this year that just gone, council has always determined rates based on site value. So on Broadview Terrace, you could have two houses sitting side by side. One house is the traditional 3-bedroom house that hasn't had any renovations, improvements, upgrades or anything. So you're very run of the mill, not being disrespectful, but run of the mill 3-bedroom house hasn't had any money spent on it since it was built 40, 50 years ago. Right next door to that house is now a 4-bedroom house that's had a major extension on the back that puts now, in addition to the 4 bedrooms, they've put an additional 2 rooms on the back. They've put a shed, they've put a pool, they've done a major veranda upgrade. So a lot of money's been spent on that house. Last year, both of those ratepayers would have paid exactly the same amounts of money because the value of the rates was determined on the value of the land. Side by side, same land, same value. From this year on, we have to use the capital value being the land and the buildings. So in that scenario, 3-bedroom house, no improvements. Let's just pick a figure, 400,000. Capital value, the 4-bedroom house with pools, extension, shed, etc. Its capital value, being the land and the value, is 800,000, just as simple as thing. So twice as much. So for the first time now, the ratepayer with the $800,000 rate will, just for the sake of this simple explanation, will pay double the amount of rates compared to the ratepayer that hasn't done the capital investment. So we've been through a process of looking at what is the implications of that shift. As I said, it's going to be a bumpy year for council in our community because what that change is going to result in is some ratepayers will actually have either a reduction in their rates or an increase in the rates up to 7%.
The graph before the change.
Yeah.
So half will.
Yeah, so half will have either reduction or up to 7%. The other half will have rate increases from 7% up to in the order of about 20%. We've introduced rate capping. So it wasn't for rate capping, that 20% could have been 40 or 50, actually 100% in one case, where someone's rates would have literally gone up 100%. So we've introduced rate capping, we've introduced differential rates. We've looked at the modelling to try and work out how we manage the impact and try to minimise the impact as much as possible. And this graphic shows that to deliver not 1 cent extra to council in terms of extra revenue, this is the potential changes in rates for next year. Go to the next slide. So separate to the change in the methodology. So if you use that example where some ratepayers are going to have a 20% increase just purely by virtue of the change in site value to capital value. Separate to that, council has said that given our increase in costs, we need to collect 5% more from rates next year compared to this year. So that 5% is not just a number that just gets plucked out of the sky. There's a bit of science behind it. So 5% essentially represents an increase to cover the cost of CPI. So basically the broad indication of inflation. 0.3% to go towards those projects I talked about before. So Foreshore, Rec Centre, Solar, and the library furniture and shelving. 0.4% to recognise that where the CPI looks at the cost of eggs and milk and stuff like that, local government doesn't go out and buy a lot of milk and eggs. We go out and buy bitumen, construction services, etc. So the cost profile for local government is a bit higher than the average basket covered by CPI. So we allocate 0.4 for that. And over time, we've been trying to look at addressing our sustainability issue and trying to get that budget repair. So that's how we come up with 5%. Some people will say 5%, oh my God, that is how, that's just a rip-off. That 5%, sorry, did someone sneeze or? laugh at me?
Just
Yep.
leave a gas.
Yeah, gas.
5%.
5%.
You
No,
go,
it sounds
you
terrible,
go
doesn't
into the shops and something's gone up by 14%. What the hell is 5% by the car?
Oh, good. You can keep talking. I'll put you. I'll put you about it in a minute. About 5%.
Things
What?
don't go up by 5 cents or by
Yeah.
10 cents
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
They'll go up by 50 cents
Yeah.
at a time. You go shopping one day, you go shopping the next
Yeah.
week, it's gone up by 50 cents.
Yeah.
That's 20% that particular item's
You
gone
can
up
come
by.
back. I was expecting it.
Anyhow.
But where I was going is 5%, what does that actually mean? 5% is, it means nothing at the end of the day, but everyone gets all hyped up and excited about, whether it's 5% or 7% or 8%. What 5% is? So the next slide. No, it's 2 down. That basically translates to about $2 per week for the average residential ratepayer. So we think $2 per week, noting that that's an average. Some people will pay more and some people will pay less. And the important thing also is that this increase also includes the waste service charge, which in the past was dealt with separately. So this time last year, we were talking about CPI plus 1.6%, and we had our models and our justification for that. We had that reflected in our long-term financial plan with the feedback from ASCOSA, with cost of living pressures, with feedback from our audit committee. Council said, we're going to pare it back. We're going to go for 5%. That's what's in front of you tonight and what we're talking to the committee about. We've shown the logic as to how that's been derived. So that 5% then is on top of the change that occurs because of the shift from site value to capital value. So back one slide, Grant. So when you put the two of those together, this is what the numbers look like. So you can see the number of ratepayers that will pay different percentages of either increases or in some cases decreases, and what percentage. So, roughly 50% will pay either have a reduction or up to 6% increase in the rates on top of this. No, this is in total.
This is
Where the other 50% will have an increase between 7 and 23%.
Is there an area of town that's going to get hit bigger with that increase? Or is it spread right across?
It's spread quite. That's what we're trying. When we consulted on the move from site to capital, there was that. Some of the comments were, well, it should be easy to model, and that it really isn't. There are some properties that might be coming from a really low site value, and we're paying a low amount of rates. And it's not that their capital value is necessarily high. It's just that it's higher than compared to the average than their site value was to the average. And so, look, there's maybe I should do some colour mapping here, mapping across the city, but it's not suburb related. Yeah. It's not like you can say, Whyalla is getting the rate increase and Whyalla Norrie isn't, or something like that. It really is very spread. Maybe I should get a peek at that.
So the capping that's in place for those that are getting it harder, that'll also come into play in the future years where they increase up.
Yeah, so what's happened is year one we've capped at 23% in the end. So council adopted that for year one the cap would be 18% plus the general rate increase. So 18% plus 5%, so 23. In year 2 and 3, the cap will be 12% plus the general rate increase. But so whatever your rates end up being in year 2, including if they're with the cap, they'll be capped at 12% plus the rate increase. So if we get a 5% rate increase next year, it'll be 17%.
Yeah. And the idea of the cap, for those that may not be familiar, is instead of having all in one hit, we try to sort of spread it out over 2 or 3 years to minimise the impact, particularly on those people that are going to have a large increase.
I know this is a state government legislation.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting penalised for looking after your property.
Yeah.
That's a penalty.
Yeah.
The guy next door may have you might be earning the same wage.
Mhm.
You might be gambling
Yeah.
it or boozing it or whatever.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get penalised.
Yeah, so there's two basically forms of taxation in Australia. There's one based on income tax, income. So I think income tax, federal government. They collect all of the income tax across the country, and that's based on income. The other form of tax is property-based tax. So there's a number of taxes, and council rates is exactly that. It is a tax, property-based tax, and I know it's hard to accept, but the logic is that the greater your property value, the greater your capacity to pay. Now, I know if you're a retiree or you're a single income person on a low income, but you happen to have inherited a family home, so you've got a very expensive asset that you own, but no income. I know that it's easy to say, well, that doesn't make sense, but in the form of, in terms of the relativity of contribution across different people, the simple logic is the more assets that you got, the higher the value of your asset, you should contribute more than someone who is in a low value asset.
So just,
So it's not, I want to emphasize, it's not about trying to penalize people investing in their property. We actually want to encourage people to invest in their property.
so it's not, isn't it
Plenty encouraged.
formulated with the sale? What
Yeah.
value they get when
Yeah.
they sell?
So the way that the valuations are determined, so the value of South Australia determines the valuation of all property right across the state. Most of the valuations are done based on desktop valuations, and they do look at the value of sale prices and how they change over time. So if you're on a particular street, 10 houses on the street, and it just happens for some reason that 8 people sell their houses all in 1 year, because there's a housing crisis, and I think this is a good time to sell up. And you've got a situation where people coming in are paying, really high prices for those 8 properties. Your property's less. Your property will invariably increase because the comparative houses in your area have gone up.
And that's not because they've done them up.
That's
It's purely on the sale.
Yeah, but so sales is part of it. The second part is that the value of general also gets details through the planning system. So they look at development applications and building approvals. So not only do they have the sale information on one hand, they know that person, your name, Irene has actually invested in her house. She's put on those extra 2 rooms, put in the pool, the shed and everything. They know that Irene's done that because she had this development approval, and we know that's the development that happened. So there's 2 ways that the VGs can actually get and determine value.
That's right. Knowing that, that's where they get the value from. They say, well, when she goes to sell it,
Yeah.
it's going to be X amount. So that's where the money comes in.
Yeah.
One way to keep the rates down
Mhm.
is everybody sell their houses at half price. And we all keep it down.
That's good. It's good logic, but I hazard to suggest that it's probably not going to work. This is the time that
So what you're saying is you don't lodge plans regarding.
This is where I will also say that through the process, the value of general can sometimes, not unsurprisingly, get valuations wrong. It may well be that those other 8 houses that just sold had all been developed, had increased their values because they'd all been developed, and the house that's left had no development. So it's not, it's not a like-for-like comparison. So it shouldn't have gone up, tenfold in value overnight because of those sales. So when you get your rates notice, and I think even advanced, over recent times, we've been putting the capital value on the rates notice. When you get your rates notice, talk to your neighbour, talk to your friend over in the other street. If your valuation, using this example, if your valuations come in at $1 million, you think, well, how can it possibly be $1 million? Because next door was only 400,000. Yes, I made an improvement. I reckon it's probably worth 800,000. DG's got it wrong because he or she, sorry, they have put $1 million value on your property and you think that can't be right. You can put in an objection to get your valuation reviewed.
Yeah, of course.
They will then do a deep dive. They'll look at your property and they'll work out whether they've got it wrong or not. But just as a caution, because I've seen this happen in other councils, one council, I won't go unnamed, encouraged all of their ratepayers to contact the value generalist to say, you know, you got it wrong, only to then find that when they put in an objection thinking that the values were going to be put down, the VG said, oh yeah, we got it wrong. They actually had to be higher. So they end up paying more rates as a consequence. Having said that, when we apply the differential, and I don't want to get too much into, you know, the maths and the theory, we're talking about only fractions. So, you know, between a 400,000 and a 500,000 may sound a lot, but when you actually look at what does that translate to in rates, it might be $15 or something. So, you know, your comments about, well, why would I invest in my money? It may well be that you're only paying an extra $15 in council, even though you've actually put your investment. So I really want to, because that comment's come up a few times. I really want to discourage people not investing in their house because you might be doing that thinking that you're going to save on council rates, but the reality is you're not going to be saving much.
Just there was a slide that we had last year, which was think like a community, not just an individual.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important at this moment
Yeah.
because I hear what you're saying. But then I think if we look at the whole community of Whyalla and the people that don't have the financial means, and it's based on capital value now, and they're getting a big benefit that's overdue. But as if we look at it from a community's point of view, that perhaps it's more equitable.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword because some ratepayers will say, oh, this is really unfair. I'm going to be paying now twice as much rates as I've paid in the past. But the other side of that is that all of the other ratepayers, so you, Kristen, you've been paying the same amount of rates as Irene for the last 40 years. You've actually effectively been subsidising the rates that Irene would have otherwise been paying if we brought this in before. So it's a really interesting debate and it's, you know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion. The key message is it is going to be a bumpy year. Rates will be abnormal this year because it's the change. At the end of the day, in terms of council's budget position, I really want to emphasise that while some people might have a 23 or 30% increase in their rates, that doesn't represent what council's getting in terms of rate revenue increase. Our rates increase, we're looking at 5% for the reasons I touched on before. Might just go
on your capital value. If you actually look at your capital value, and I know what my place is, it's about 160 grand less put it on the market.
Yeah.
So if you want to argue it, that's a risk.
Yes.
And I think you find if you come up with 160 now, I think very soon it will be 200
Yeah,
slash 250.
Yeah, the BG is always a bit behind. In those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just want to try get through last couple of slides? Is there on the revenue? Sorry, on the revenue side, we've
That's
missed
it.
where's our external funding?
Oh, it's after you put this before.
Ah,
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it gonna be finished
Yeah.
pretty
All
soon?
right. So maybe if we can just go forward and I'll come back to this one. So just sorry, jumping around a little bit. Want to now look forward a little bit. We've been talking a lot about hydrogen, renewable energy, housing, you know, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, still work's going to be here or not. We've now started to do some modelling. We've been talking about the fact that there is development coming. We've looked at some scenarios, including everything from the land that the state government will buy from council. So the land that they're going to be building their hydrogen power station on is council/community owned land. So we've got an option agreement in place where the state can either lease or purchase that land. We've got a discussion as early as Monday of next week to talk to the state government about how much of that land are they wanting to buy and what's the final figure and the like. So everything from selling land to the state government for the hydrogen jobs plan facility, through to things like housing development on Cloven Reserve. So all of you,
Where are you going to get builders to build them?
Yeah,
Because how
yeah.
many builders are going down the drain,
yeah,
leaving the state,
yeah,
leaving the country?
yeah. I often think about the four-legged stool or chair. We've got the land, we've got the demand. I reckon we'll very soon have the money available from federal and state government to invest in houses. To your point, actually getting the builders and the actual development happening is the one leg of the stool that I'm actually, or chair that I'm actually really worried about. Having said that, the private sector will respond to the market. We live in a market economy, supply and demand. I'll just drop some numbers
You can't get a plumber for a lot of money if you
Yeah.
get married.
right here, right now. 100% with you.
If you can't get a plumber, you
6
put
months.
pipes down.
Yeah,
How
6
can you
months, 12 months, 2 years. I'm hoping that the situation will be different. The reason why I'm hoping and expecting it will be different is that when you look at some of the development that is in the pipeline, so hydrogen jobs plan, it will get built. In order to build the hydrogen jobs plan, the state government's going to need housing for workers to build the hydrogen power station. I don't know if any of you saw that steam cartoon in the Wildlife News just recently. That these people running really fast. One person saying, "Are we rushing to build a hydrogen power station?" And the other guys responded, "No, we're rushing to build the houses for the workers to build the hydrogen power station." So, whoever typed that was very good. But hydrogen power station will be built over the next 2 or 3 years.
Fly in,
They-
fly out,
They will need,
fly in, fly out.
yeah, but they'll need houses/beds, which is where I'm trying to get to. They will need houses/beds. There is already a shortage. We know that. Cloven Reserve, we know now, the state government's confirmed with their state prosperity project, and it's on the state government website now, that Cloven Reserve will include a cabin park facility developed by Bentley. So you've got cabin park in Port Augusta and Port Pirie. GFG residential facility. Again, question mark, will they build it? How long will they build it? I understand that. But 500 beds. I don't know the number for Bentley's, but let's just say 300 beds from Bentley's, because they're not going to be building 50. They'll be building more than that. 300 beds Bentley, 500 beds GFG residential facility, a strip of houses, maybe 40 or 50 houses, which we know that Renewal SA will be bringing that to the market sometime soon to get the developers interested to start building. So we've got the Pony Club site just down the road, which the Renewal SA are also looking at in terms of a housing opportunity. To your point, in terms of trades, separate to those houses, there is no doubt that we will have some temporary accommodation in our city because we'll just need it. State government is currently talking to accommodation providers, so hoteliers, cabin parks. Who else is there? That'll do for now.
Yeah.
Saying, and your Sundowners, your Quests, your Comfort Inn, all of those providers to say, can you deliver more beds on the ground in the not too distant future because we need it. So all those discussions are happening now.
A lot of these people don't bring their money, the family, the money into bed. They're literally fly in, fly out people.
Yeah.
And all the money that they're earning by building this thing here gets spent wherever
Yeah.
they actually live.
There's nobody here that's going to take the jobs.
But that's, whilst on the one hand it's a challenge, glass half empty, glass half full. Agree with you. That's potentially the case. The glass half full
I try
is that, yeah.
but most of the time I end up being happy
Yeah.
too.
And it's easy to do. Glass half full is that if we've got an extra 1,000 people in our city on any given day, so in 9 months, 12 months time, every day of the week, we'll have potentially an extra 1,000 people in our city. Those 1,000 people are going to need not only beds, but they're going to need hairdressers, they're going to need doctors, they're going to need X, Y, and Z. But even if it was, pick a number, 1% of that 1,000, decided, hey, well, it's not actually a bad place. Now that I've come here, I can see what's here. I've been down to the foreshore. I happen to like fishing, so I've chucked a line into the, at Point Lowly or the Dee. All of a sudden, we've potentially got an opportunity. And back to maybe to your point about what can we as community members do in terms of supporting the growth and development. What do you think is most likely to attract people to want to come and live in a place?
They can get
A
stuff.
clean, happy place.
Smiling
Can't get
faces.
stuff.
Right.
That's their face, really
But
important.
a welcoming, glass half full, I'm picking on now, but a very welcoming, open community that's very positive, aspirational, forward-looking, excited.
But
Is that the sort of place that you want to come and live?
they are going to
You'll
come,
bring
they
our
are
family
going to
and
come
friends?
here for the jobs. How
Yeah.
many people will this hydrogen plant
Yeah.
employ?
Yeah.
Once the building's
Yeah.
sold up,
Short answer is I've got absolutely no idea,
it will be
but
very.
it will be minimal. Yeah.
So, all
Yeah.
those houses that you're building.
Yeah.
They're all going to be empty, or half, three
Yeah.
quarters will be
Yeah.
empty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Half of them.
Yeah.
And if the steelworks
Yeah, they were
doesn't
really built.
Yeah.
go ahead,
Yeah.
and, we've been here
Yeah.
for 50 years and seen all
Yeah.
the promises
Yeah.
year after year,
Yeah.
generation.
Yeah.
None of them have come true.
Yeah. I can tell you right now that we've got developers circling Whyalla. In some instances now with applications lodged for development for apartments and houses in Whyalla right now. So it's starting to happen. Most of the community haven't seen it yet because it's sort of sitting in a computer system and waiting for planning approval. But to your point,
They'll only come here if there's jobs.
yeah, and to your point, hydrogen is going to be like a huge magnet for industry and business. We've already got people ringing me up as the CEO of the council saying, hey, can we get hydrogen because we want to build the next generation of data centers, because with AI, artificial intelligence, the computing power globally is going to go up significantly with all of the AI that's in front of us. They've done some projections that in, I think it's 8 years' time, 10% of the global energy will be consumed on data centers just running AI. Now, the traditional data centers were very big buildings, huge draws on power because they've got all these computers, lots of air coolers trying to cool the computers down. The next generation of data center actually wants to use hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, expose that to the heat generated from the computers to cool down the air. So instead of using a whole lot of power to run air conditioners, they put liquid hydrogen up and that cools it down. Plus they use renewable energy. So all of a sudden, you've now got new business, new industry. About a month ago, those who interested in this sort of thing, there was the Adelaide Motorsports Festival, or whatever it was called. There was some announcements around a company called Zero Petroleum. A lot of people might think, yeah, big deal. What does that mean? There was an announcement done in Adelaide. Zero Petroleum wants to produce synthetic petrol, man-made petrol in a lab. Think about all the diesel and petrol that's consumed globally from fossil fuels. They want to manufacture fuel. And what do they need to manufacture synthetic fuel? Hydrogen. Think about how significant, once that hydrogen plant is actually on the ground, what that will mean to, coming to your point, the jobs. There will be jobs at plenty.
But this won't be the only
People will
hydrogen
be
plant in the world.
the capital
Sorry?
city.
It won't be the only hydrogen plant in the world.
No, no,
There's
absolutely.
competition out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's not as if we're going to
Yeah.
grab it all.
Yeah, that's right. But
Like,
think,
Even
think
just the
about,
tiniest
Yeah.
bit of it's going to be
yeah,
huge.
think about that 50-kilometre radius thing I told you about before, and think about what makes South Australia, particularly Whyalla, really unique. I'll leave that with you. So, anyway, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. So we've looked at the modelling. We anticipate that over the next, 4 to 5 years, with some of these developments coming online, we as a council and as a community, as a result, could have potentially an additional $1.6 million of revenue coming from new ratepayers, new development. That is really significant because if you look at what developments happened in our city in recent years and decades, there's not been a lot of new development. So the ability to actually grow the pie in terms of the number of ratepayers and the amount of rate revenue that's being potentially collected means that the financial constraints and resources constraints and all of the many of the challenges that we've got right here, right now, we'll have more ability to deal with if we've got a larger revenue base to be able to tackle some of those issues. Next slide. External funding come up before. We are very, very focused on leveraging collaboration, partnerships across a number of different spectrums. Ensuring strategic lands get sold at fair market value. The mayor had the privilege of signing the options agreements, and potentially he's going to be one of the most successful mayors in terms of the economic value delivered to this city. All of that lands that the state government is potentially going to buy from us 2 or 3 years ago was worth this much. We were, I think, quite clever, and we said, hey, state government, you've just done a land deal with 5 other companies, 6 companies over for pork and knifing. Hey, what did you put on the land over there when you were selling state government lands? So what do you think we use to determine the value on our land? So our lands, literally overnight, and with the mayor's signature, went from there to there. Flip side of that, if we wait another 5 years, maybe it'll be twice as much, but that aside. So getting fair market value for property, whether that's through leases, through land sales or the like, is really important. We can't keep doing what we've done in the past. We can't keep having community groups, paying $500 for, in some cases, prime real estate in our city. Private-public partnerships. Very soon, council will be going to the market with our former Darling Terrace civic building, as well as some vacant land that we've got on Ekblom Street. We'll be going to the market saying that council is interested in getting expressions of interest from the market for a mixed-use development, where council would either be a contributing partner / investor in a development and or an anchor tenant. So we'll put it to the market, but what we want to look at is actually taking those sites to the market and saying, here's the story of Whyalla, here's why you'd want to invest in Whyalla, and by the way, we as a council have got a particular need in that this building that we're in at present, we're only here temporarily. We need a new home. Market, tell us how you might deliver a new home for us, but also provide some more commercial space, retail, potentially residential accommodation as well. So public-private partnerships. I've mentioned the precinct partnership program before. Very strong engagement with the state government. Many of you who attended the state prosperity projects sort of roadshow that the Premier and others did a few months ago. You would have heard the Premier talking about, we've got what the world needs here. And in that context, whilst it hasn't come to into reality at present, the state government, probably completely expected, is very much focused on their project, being the hydrogen jobs plan. They're now starting to think about, well, what does that actually mean to build a hydrogen power station and to deliver this project? What does that mean in terms of houses, GPs, hairdressers, other economic opportunities? So the opportunity to do partnerships and program direct government funding, federal government and state government are already putting and have committed investment into our patch, particularly around the hydrogen renewable energy space. We're expecting the state government will take some of Clothing Reserve to market soon. That will be to stimulate and encourage more direct investment, and the state government, I think, has acknowledged that construction of housing in region is damn expensive and it's going to be damn hard to get builders here. So state government's going to have to put some financial contribution, I think, into getting the housing started. And then I think once we get the housing started, there'll be that snowball domino effect. To your point, all of a sudden there's going to be a whole heap of plumbers, electricians, landscaping, etc. is going to be needed. Dare I say, in this forum, we probably need a Bunnings. So very soon on my to-do list is to go and have a chat with Bunnings and say, hey, did you know what's happening in Whyalla? And I think it's about time you thought about putting a Bunnings store in Whyalla. And the Growing Regions Fund that I've touched on before. Next slide. Rate relief.
Excuse me, you
Yep.
just mentioned Bunnings.
Yep.
There are enough people in Whyalla already who go to Bunnings.
Yeah.
Not here in Whyalla.
Yeah.
They spend their money there
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
bring it all back to Whyalla.
Yeah.
and use it.
yeah, yeah.
Why is Bunnings going to say, hey, we've already got half a Whyalla shop in their shops, why do we need to build one there?
When that domino effect, and when we start talking about 10 houses becoming 50 houses, becoming 200 houses, becoming 500 houses, to a couple of the points, many of the owners of property in Whyalla don't live in Whyalla, they're investors. They don't have to invest or haven't had to invest in their property for a long time because they're already getting good market return on their rentals as an investment property, and there's no competition, so they're getting good value and they actually don't have to do anything. When new housing stock comes online, and I haven't seen it yet, but I think what the state government and Renewal SA will probably potentially say, so don't hold me to this. The new houses that will be built along Hogan Reserve, I think it's likely to be designated as government houses for essential workers. So your police officers, your doctors and nurses at the hospital, some teachers and the like, that are currently in houses around Whyalla. The government will say, well, we're investing in these houses. These will be government houses. We've got new stock coming on board. So all of a sudden you've got new development coming in, hopefully at a reasonable price point. All of a sudden then you then start putting pressure on all of those other landlords or owners of property who have not spent much money on their property for 10 or 15 years, now having to put some money into their property because there's now competition and new housing stock coming online. It all comes to scale, and I know it's a question of timing and when it will happen. But I still remain confident that it's going to happen, and the knock-on effects for the plumbers, electricians, and all that other stuff will happen. And I think back to the comment on Bunnings, all of a sudden, if there's more urban renewal, gentrification of the housing stock, more people, all of a sudden, if your house, in your example, your house is starting to look a bit old and tired, you may be thinking about maybe,
Education.
yeah,
But don't think it makes the plumbing,
Yeah.
construction,
Yeah.
like you got your lumber, you've
Yeah.
got your bricks, you've got whatever, it's just like Bianco.
Yeah.
So they'll come.
Yeah.
Bunnings have opened up shops in the Barossa
Yeah.
before the towns ever grew, and that's only been, what, 5-6
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. So will Bunnings come here? Don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's a good business case for them to do so. What we need to do is get in front of them and say, hey, did you know this is happening?
The other thing
actually-
is if they do, the two hardware stores we've got at the moment,
Sorry.
if they do.
Yeah.
The two hardware stores we've got at the moment will defunct, won't they?
Maybe. I don't
Yeah.
think so. I don't think so, based on the issue I've had elsewhere. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Very good.
Quickly get to the last slide before you go.
Yeah, well,
Consultation process. Send in a letter.
Yeah.
Jump online, come to a public meeting. I'll go through this in a bit more detail on the 20th of May. So
Yeah.
if you want to come and talk to council, what is the other options? Talk to an elected member, share your views.
Yeah.
Please, having come and listened to what you've heard tonight, please give us some
Yeah,
feedback in terms of what you want.
thank you.
I've heard that many times before. I've been in other locations where Bunnings are set up. There was always concern about the Mitre 10 and other hardware stores going out of business. It didn't happen in those locations. Maybe it will happen here, but I think if you part of the business case of Bunnings, but also the reason why I think other hardware stores will survive is that the scale of development is going to be big enough for everyone to have a slice of the pie.
Well, Lincoln's a card point in case. Bunnings right there. Mitre 10 Straco still thriving down there.
Yeah.
And the later days Mitre 10's next while a resident, she said business has never been better.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in Port Lincoln.
There's a lot of money here too. There's a lot of people work and a good food. So I don't think it's a drama.
Yeah. Sorry, jumping around a little bit. I'll wrap it up now. In terms of me talking, and then I'll get you talking. Consultation process. So we've got a window of opportunity now in front of us where we're really keen to have the conversations, get the feedback, hear what you've got to say about all the things we've covered today. There will be an opportunity for those who want to come and actually speak. We know some people don't like writing, but they like speaking. So you can come and actually do a presentation or deputation to the council meeting on the 20th. If you want to jump online, send an email. If you want to just send them a letter, speak to a councillor. There's many ways that you can have your voice and wear ears wide open. So I think I might stop there. Maybe if you go back to the 3 slides in terms of those questions, Grant. So, having heard what you've heard today, what do you think? There's something missing. There's services that we haven't talked about that you want us to do more of. There's things you think we should do less of. Do you think we're being unreasonable with our rate rise, or do you think that seems about reasonable?
No.
$2 a week, you change the tune. I thought you were going to be supportive.
Well, unless it's changed from when we worked this thing out at the
Right.
12% cap.
Mhm.
If it's altered from that, then I'd like to go and do the maths.
Yeah. So as I said, change from site value to capital value will result in either decreases or increases,
I've got all that.
Yeah.
I've worked all that out.
and then plus
All that out.
plus 5% for the average residential rate payer. I have to keep emphasising that. Some people will pay more than 5%, some people will pay less, but we can't give a definitive answer to everyone at a high level, but we say 5% is what we're looking at collecting in terms of increased rate revenue. And then that overall balance, ultimately, the feedback we want is, do you think we've got that about the right balance in terms of extra rate contribution versus council services? Do you want less services and less rates? Do you want more services, and dare I say more rates?
Yeah,
You know,
we need more things.
pay more rates
Pay more
or,
rates,
sorry,
and therefore we should pay more rates to get more services.
what additional services would you like to see?
Like to see a few general practitioners who might actually stay in the city.
So council's role in terms of getting GPs to stay, is that around the housing, the public amenities, the facilities?
No idea, but we don't have a lot of luck at keeping lots of these people in the city.
Other comments or thoughts? Kristen? Oh, cool.
I'll start by saying off the record. Well, I mean, I've got 3, so if that's
Yeah, quite.
cool. So first one is, I guess, in regards to the airport, general curiosity there. It's obviously running at a significant loss, something about 800,000 a year.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Obviously, we wanted to see action from the federal government in regards to that strategy.
Yeah.
Unlikely to be picked up. Does council have any strategies or processes in place of potentially increasing the revenue it's able to collect from the airport as an asset?
So I'll just provide a response to one of your comments. That you think the federal government's not going to pick up some of our ideas. I think the federal government will pick up our idea, but it's going to take time. And that idea that we're pushing forward, which we think it's actually a no-brainer.
The problem is that it's sensible policy, so that's
So the issue that we're talking about and the opportunity is that with the security screening costs for a airport like ours, relatively low numbers of people using the airport compared to other airports, but we've got the same essentially fixed cost of providing the security screening. So for someone to fly in and out of Whyalla, the cost of that security screening is probably in the order of about $40, $45 per passenger per flight. That's just for the security screening costs. So council can either say, well, we're going to just increase our passenger levy, or we're going to pass that on to the airlines plural, but airline don't. And there's a risk that the airline will say, oh, that's fine. Councils now increase their fares, so we'll just put that on the ticket price. So it's unfortunately disadvantaging anyone who gets to fly into regional locations, and we're not the only location. So instead of having our people coming in and out of Whyalla paying $45 per person each time they come in and out, our solution to the federal government is that they should be looking at the cost of security screening right across the whole country, including the Brisbane airports, Adelaide airports and the like. And every passenger on every flight pays 75 cents or thereabouts. And the money that's collected from that 75 cents per ticket per person, every flight around the whole of Australia covers the cost of security screening. So that then goes towards the security screening costs that currently we're picking up. So there's a good solution.
I mean, I totally understand that.
To your question though, I was just clarifying the comment that I think the feds will pick that up at some stage, but it'll take some time. Your question is ultimately, what can a council do to address the fact that the airport is running at a loss, and in particular, is there additional revenue that can be generated by the airport? The additional revenue could be one of two things. One is through passenger levy, which is pretty small, and ultimately that goes back to the users of the service. That makes air flight more expensive, reduces the number of people potentially flying, and it exacerbates the problem. So that's not really a solution. And we're talking about 5/5 as overall. So our passenger levy at present is $11.50. Even if we were to double that, that's not going to give us 800,000. So that's sort of that per transactional revenue stream. The other way of getting revenue from the airport, which has not yet been committed to by council, we're still doing some thinking and planning around this, is how can we actually get more commercial uses of the airport for things like maybe freight movements, storage facilities, aviation related industries or businesses actually setting up and paying council in form of, say, a lease for space, and actually leveraging or using the asset that is the airport and the asset that is our locality. Mayor and I have been talking for a long time about autonomous or drone flights. So think Uber Air with no drivers. That's a little way down the track, and that's the boat that we're playing, been sort of internal joke for some time. But more importantly, freight movements. You think about the amount of freight that gets moved on trucks at present around regional South Australia. Whyalla is actually in a prime location, and this may actually unlock the airline question in terms of how we get freight here. But if we can get freight to the Whyalla airport, all of the hydrogen, all of the mining resources projects right around the Eyre Peninsula and the north of the state, every time they need a widget of some sort, at present they get it put on a truck, or they pay for a courier to drive it to them. Uber Freight in the future, in the form of autonomous drones, being able to deliver freight basically point to point at a price point that is much better and more efficient than road transport, I think is one of those revenue opportunities, and what sets Whyalla Airport apart from many other opportunities or other locations. And the other thing, just on the subject of drone, again, this is just an out there idea, is that we also happen to be sitting right next to Coltana Army Training Area. Think about the shift in modern warfare and think drone warfare. Just listen to what's happening over in the Ukraine and Russia presence and in Israel. There's a shift now towards drone warfare. Think about our airport and an army training facility right next door and what that could potentially represent in terms of a commercial opportunity for our airport. So my sense is that there is great opportunity to get more revenue from our asset. The old challenge always is that sometimes you've got to spend money to make money. We don't have the facilities there right now to be able to go out and say to company X, come and start building your hydrogen airplanes or start doing your drone freight business from Whyalla Airport because we don't have the facilities just at present. Back to that,
Talking 2X because they're quite keen on
2X.
Elon Musk was a joke.
Back to that regional precincts and partnerships. Just going back to the comment before, 9 months, 4 months time, there's going to be an extra 1,000 people in our city on any given day. How are those people actually going to get in and out of our city, given that a lot of them either fly in or fly out or drive in, drive out at present? What interest has the state government got now in our airport and the cost of flights in and out of our airport when their project is going to require potentially 1,000 seats on a plane every week? Just put it out there.
No, just genuine curiosity. That's why I said off the revenue stuff.
So
he wants to jump in.
So no short-term plans. We are doing a service review. We've got a number of service reviews where we've got an independent company called BDO looking at our services, service levels, business or service delivery models. The airport's one of the focus areas. You know, there's a number of different considerations that council will need to have in due course. You know, should council continue to own the airport, or do we look to have some form of divestment? No one's going to buy an airport that's running at a loss, but you know, is there other ways that we could manage that airport? You know, do we do something in collaboration with the other airports? So Port Meakin, Ceduna, for example, do we set up a regional subsidiary and we have one entity that manages all 3 or 4 airports across the state? There's a number of different ways that we can potentially look at how we can get more out of the airport. We don't have the answers right now, but the service review, and I think some of those emerging opportunities that we've talked about, again, hydrogen's becoming a thing in aviation. There's companies that are actually now starting to circle Whyalla, thinking, can we get access to hydrogen because we want to, you know, run hydrogen planes. So yeah, lots of opportunities. I'll quickly ask if there's any other questions and I'll come back.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to monopolise the time.
Any other questions? Otherwise I'll go back. Yeah, next one.
So I guess this goes to, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but in terms of that retention, can council have any plans, strategies in terms of skills retention, and not just within sort of essential services, whether that's medicine, teaching, etc. Like I'm, like a lot of young people, quite nomadic in my movements, probably more so than most, but you know, when I move to whatever location, I do look at what's there to keep me there. So, you know, I'm on contract until December. Should find out. I'm on contract, and then, you know, whenever I find out, there's 2 steps is always, do I have a job after that contract? And then do I stay? Is always the 2 questions I have in my mind. So, you know, what sort of council plans on for young people who are in the beginning of their careers, you know, cutting their teeth, because in regional areas you are a big cog in a small machine in whatever industry that you're sort of going into. And one of the things that regional towns always try and do is be like one of those places where, oh yeah, I plan on going there 6 months, 1 year, etc. And then I wound up there 10 years later and I'm still there.
Yeah.
But the other thing, sorry, just a quick one.
Yeah.
To get the young ones up to stay here, to take up trades.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and there's a couple of different levels I can respond to that. I'll do the shotgun. I'll just cover a number of different things. One thing that we're currently doing is we're talking to both University of SA and the University of Adelaide with the merger of the two. There are discussions happening between the two universities about what is the course offering and what's the future service delivery model in a location such as Whyalla. In one of the early discussions, the pro-chancellor, I think it was, of the University of Adelaide, we started talking about hydrogen renewable energy. There is an entity called the HILT CRC, so Heavy Industry Low Carbon Transition Collaborative Research Centre. Lots of money from federal government, lots of money from industry, all focused on hydrogen renewable energy. Back to my 50-kilometre radius, where the epicentre of the world's future. The Pro Vice Chancellor, unsolicited, said, why couldn't Whyalla actually be the place where, if you want to study anything to do with hydrogen, renewable energy, green steel, green oil, the place to go to learn about those is the epicentre of all things good, Whyalla. And he actually, in his own, just talking about this idea, he said, in the future, why couldn't you have international students coming to, not to Australia, not to Adelaide, but to Whyalla to study do their studies, have the industry application in situ with direct connection to industry, and for Whyalla to become essentially that centre of excellence around educational research and skills developments around in that space. And to the point where you've either done your study and cut your teeth in Whyalla, being the world's centre of excellence for all these things, or you've done your engineering degree in Adelaide or somewhere else. Now, this was the Pro Vice Chancellor of the University of Adelaide thinking about what Whyalla's future could be. We know that 87% of the students that study in region stay in region. So having more people being able to access studies in region, whether it's through the universities, Uni Hub, Spencer Gulf, is looking at establishing a presence in Whyalla. Currently, they've got a presence, particularly in Port Augusta, in Port Pirie and Port Lincoln. Their offering is a bit different in that they essentially provide a suite of courses provided by a suite of different universities across Australia, but you can access those through Uni Hub, Spencer Gulf. You've got access to facilities and some on-ground support doing your studies in a regional location like Whyalla. That's growing. University of SA and Adelaide, I think, will grow its course offering in Whyalla. We're the only place other than Mount Gambier that has got a university campus in South Australia. Again, we are unique. One of the things that we're doing in terms of positioning Whyalla and trying to address some of these issues that we've got in the past is that one of the challenges that we have as a state is that we're very much a city state. So Metro Adelaide is sort of sucks everything up. And once you get outside of Metro Adelaide, everything else in South Australia is pretty small scale compared to all the other states. Queensland, you've got big regional cities, New South Wales, Victoria. South Australia, we don't have those big regional cities. We're other than Mount Gambier, we're the closest thing to a Bendigo, Ballarat, Townsville, Rockhampton. We're that equivalent in South Australia, but we're at a scale that's just a bit too small at present. But we are advocating to the state government, and we've got support from the Eyre Peninsula region, that there should be strategic investment in Whyalla and create the hub and spoke model. So if someone wants to study in region, little Johnny in Kimber or Cleve or Cal, little Johnny, if he wants to do an engineering degree, he probably goes to Adelaide, to University of Adelaide, because that's where the study is. If some of that study can actually, if little Johnny can come to Whyalla and do maybe his first year and maybe his last year placement in Whyalla, at least he's actually in region and he's got access to those studies. And as I said, we know that 87% of students that study in region will stay in region. So to your question, the universities are focused on skills development of locals in region. Uni Hub, I've mentioned, TAFE SA was missing in action for a long time. They've started to reinvest and try to reinstate some of their training offering and capacity in region. I think it's gone under the radar for most people, but I think they've just spent about $3 million, 2.5, you might know. 2.5, $3 million on some new facilities in TAFE. Most people don't even know that they've done that. They've now repartnered or re-engaged with GFG to start doing recommence doing some of their apprenticeship training in region in Whyalla. So the TAFE is responding, universities are responding. I mentioned the local jobs growth program before. There's a whole collective of training providers, service providers and the like working. There's currently work being done in terms of a hydrogen road plan in terms of this the workforce requirements. There's an Upper Spencer Gulf workforce strategy. But then now finally there's a lot of planning and focus going on. How do we build the skilled workforce we need, particularly in region, because we know that these projects are going to require a lot of new people. And so the gentleman asked in the back before, once the facility is established, yes, it will have maybe 30, 40 people, which is not a big number, but it's still 30 or 40 jobs that are not right now. We know that it's already challenging to get skilled workforce into region and keep them in region. I think to someone's question, your question, how do we keep them in region? We know that there's already shortages of jobs right here, right now. And you think about the tsunami of jobs that are coming with the development that are coming. So jobs won't be an issue in the future. And I would contend that they're not an issue right now. There's lots of jobs around there. Some people, I'm sure, will challenge that. Not before time hearing what's happening at Steelworks just at present, but jobs won't be an issue. To your point, people will come here, yes, if they've got a job, but they've got to have a lifestyle and they've got to have amenity and livability commensurate with someone else. You can get a job in Adelaide or you can get a job in Whyalla. That livability piece is really important. So council is focused on improving the amenity of our city. You look at things like the upgrade of the airport that we did not that long ago, the new jetty that we've installed, the foreshore master plan. That's all investment in public space, civic and city amenity. And it's all about trying to create the opportunity. What our foreshore is missing at present in my mind, and since this is the CEO talking, not the council talking, is we should have a number of restaurants, cafes, wine bars, shops.
That's what, when you're on the jetty and we walk every day, people from interstate everywhere, didn't know this place existed. Where can we go? Nothing along here. That is the down. That needs to bust.
So
Gotta be something.
So that that's I'm glad I've got a positive response from a number of people. And
also, I was surprised when I first moved here, and it's one of the few coastal towns I've been to, or coastal cities I've been to that didn't have a pub right on the beach.
Yes. But again, foresight. Why wasn't it 10, 15 years ago thinking, we're going to get to a stage, we've got a fantastic beach, something should have been done or planned. You've got 3 or 4 pubs in town. Why back then didn't they have the foresight to think, let's just put one down there? And you've got this amazing jetty beach. There's nothing there.
So it's challenging because a lot of that land is actually Crown land, state government lands along that foreshore area. That makes it hard to commercialise or monetize what could happen in that space. And you'll have some people saying, no, you can't sell the farm, no, you can't sell the land. But on the other hand, people say, well, we'd love a wine bar or we'd love a cafe or restaurant or something down there. So the foreshore master plan, ultimately, once we start making that investment, that in turn should start to hopefully catalyse other investment happening and getting other services and facilities that we need to create that vibrancy and to build that attraction to keep people here longer.
And that's what will keep people like you, if you come here, you're gonna think, wow, great foreshore, this, that, I'll stay there, there's a lifestyle. That's what.
Yeah, but we haven't got GPs that'll stay put. We haven't got a gynecologist. We haven't got an obstetrician. My granddaughter had to go to Port Augusta in labour to produce her baby because she could not give birth in Whyalla. That's disgusting. 40 odd years ago, her mother was born here in Whyalla. We had 3 gynecologists that lived here. 2 of them were obstetricians. They were needed for the birth. They could do. Well, Dr. Crowe was a great loss. But let's face it. There's never going to be one of him.
So it's
He built trees, planted all the trees as well.
No, I've watched the movie.
When you talked about the trees, I thought to myself, poor Dr. Crowe.
Linking a couple of these things, I know it's big picture and it's futuristic, and some people must say it will never happen. But you think about if we've got international students coming in to study in Whyalla, you've got student accommodation, think multi-story student accommodation, similar to what's in Adelaide. Some of that accommodation, take the word student off the front. So instead of student accommodation or workers accommodation, all of a sudden you've got new apartments, buildings, service apartments being built. In terms of attracting and retaining specialists here, to me, the missing or the most challenging thing within Whyalla is the housing diversity, and particularly that higher quality, newer, contemporary housing options, which is what I think is going to get people to want to come and stay. You know, I know time's probably marching on, well and truly, I'm sure. You know, again, highly speculative, may never happen, but you know, we've got people now talking about our marina, and should there be a marina development there and have a whole heap of townhouse apartments overlooking the marina. There was a saying at one stage, why not? Okay. Why couldn't we have the equivalent of a North Haven, you know, townhouse development happening on our marina? And people, you know, instead of having a car spot out the front of their house, they have a berth for their boat. And I know you might say that there's not a lot of money here, but if we can build the city amenity, we've got with the precinct partnerships and with everything else, just think about the fact that some of the companies that are currently looking at Whyalla are looking at, you know, investing billions of dollars into hydrogen production facilities. Size that again, billions of dollars. When those people come into town, they don't want to be in a second-class cabin with no access to a pub on the foreshore or no wine bar. These people are going to want to stay in good quality accommodation, have good access to good services and amenities. So it is really challenging. Many of you have lived in Whyalla for a long time, so you know Whyalla through the lens of your lived experience for, in some cases, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
Bill, how many years have you been here?
5 years.
Yeah. So, you know, some people listen to me talking about the future and how wonderful it could be, and you might be thinking, nah, this is never going to happen. But, you know, you think about what I just said.
50 years ago, it was a thriving, growing place to be.
So
now,
I'm hoping it's not 50 years time, but in 15 years time, why can't it be like that again?
Very interesting. I left in when I was 21,
Mm-hmm.
and to come back
knowing a lot of the people that I went to school with, and I went to 4 different schools here. It's one of the livable places that we looked at. I was in Adelaide, went to Port Augusta. You look at their council and different councils do different things. And a child with a disability, we come back to this. We never thought we'd come back here. When we were leaving, BHP was shut down, and Irene's family, the Greeks, were moving out. So you took, 15, 20 people from one family going out, and they said, it's going to be dead. It's going to be dead. We come back 30 years later, and you know what? I'm happy to be back, and I think it's progressed. From what people said it hadn't, and sometimes I get that people, there's still challenges. I work for a department where I can see challenges every day, but as a livable city, we actually went back here rather than go back to Adelaide. So it has got potential.
Absolutely. And I think, back to that potentially unsustainable, and a lot of people talk about opportunity, and I will stop talking now. I've been to many locations in the past, and everyone always talks about, the opportunity in a location, what could be. I think if you look just at the context and how it's shifted as in the shortest period of time as 3 years. So when I started here, no one was talking about hydrogen. So just in a short 3-year window, the future of Whyalla and the opportunity, I think, is now starting to be clearer. Not perfect yet, it's still evolving. But if you look at all the drivers, and hopefully most of you attended the State Prosperity Project, the Premier did it very well, much better than I can ever do. He is absolutely convinced that the world wants what we've got, and I agree with him. And it's now a question about how do we deliver what we've got to the world, and I'm excited about the future. Anyway, I've done a very bad job tonight, so I apologise. I've gone off on a few tangents and on my little hobby pause. Back to council budgets and services. Any other questions or comments? Anything that's missing? Things you want to see more of, less of?
There was a comment earlier about what the community can do too. There's a lot of really knowledgeable and intelligent people retired in the community. Is there a way that they can maybe volunteer and be involved with some of the things that council don't have the resources for? You talk about the people who haven't got skills, using them. Well, we've got people there that have got skills, and we should tap into those somehow. And it might be register your interest in what they can give, and you can maybe drag a bit here and there.
And again, I revert back to the vehicle, which is the community planning. It's not necessary for council to necessarily host or facilitate community members getting involved and doing stuff. We'll certainly help, but where we didn't land, I don't know if you attended the last forum, WTS forum, where we were starting to go towards was looking at how do we all sort of commit to or pledge to actually delivering on the community plan, both at an individual and an organisational level. And the mechanics of how we might do that hasn't quite been landed yet. But we want to harness, without doubt, the passion, the knowledge, the intellect, and the capabilities of our community, because the community plan is all about our community and thriving as a community going forward. So short answer, that was a long answer to yes, we want to work out how to do that, and we're happy to chat some more to you about that.
Are you taking some of that up with the retailers? Because I'd rather buy stuff in Whyalla. And supposedly keep my money in Whyalla because it belongs to the wholesaler, but so that it's revolving around here. Anytime you go looking for something that's not necessarily too far out there, but a little bit out there, they just don't, oh no, we haven't got that. Just go online. Buy it out there, pay for it out there. It gets sent here. Australia Post also gets a. And the shops don't want to make an effort to actually, and it's not just the supermarkets and little shops as well.
Yeah.
They're not interested in trying to give you service.
Yeah.
They could make the phone calls that I then go home and make every place, you know, all the places I can think of in South Australia to see if they've got what I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before I just get to, oh, go online and
Yeah.
either have it shipped from China or wherever it ends up coming from, Sydney, wherever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, I want to buy it here.
Yeah.
My family think I'm stupid. They just
Yeah.
automatically go online and get
Yeah.
everything to the doorstep rather than having to go to a shop.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's an interesting question. I'm not probably going to do that one justice in the time frame we've got here. But what I'll do is I'll share another example where I've had some. This was a particular challenge. I used to work at a council called Prospect Council. Prospect Road, at a point in time, on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday, not a single shop was open. You could shoot a cannon down Prospect Road and not hit a soul on a Saturday afternoon. The council of the day invested in a master plan redevelopment of the village parks within their Main Street precinct, and did a number of things to improve the public realm in that space. That catalysed development to the point where there's now a cinema complex there. So Nova Cinema set up, a whole heap of new shops. I drove down Prospect Road only a couple of days ago. There's multiple development sites with cranes on them. So to the retail point, which was your question, the Main Street precinct that we've got, Darling, Patterson and the like, there's a real question about what investment could or should council make in that area to stimulate retail investment or development in that area. Council's role, I think, will be around potentially creating some of that public realm improvements, supporting development through our planning processes, encouraging investment, sharing the story that there's money to be made in Whyalla for local retailers to come and do a good job in Whyalla. Beyond that, I think I'll probably struggling a little bit about what council can do to try and specifically address it. A bit again comes back to a bit of the supply and demand considerations. If we get more people living here, shopping here, spending their money here, that in turn will stimulate market response. So more shops will set up if they know there's money to be made here. Council is doing work with the likes of the Whyalla Business and Tourism Association. We're talking to a number of developers it's now in a public portal, so I assume it's public knowledge, but there is some development happening down around the Darling Street, Patterson Street end of the world with, drive-through bottle-os and potential apartment accommodation being built. So there'll be more people living and walking the streets around that area. So that will generate retail activity. So
it's not necessarily more retail places.
Mm-hmm.
It's that the place that you can go to buy the whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you ask about it.
Yeah.
Oh no, we don't have that. Is there any chance you can get in? Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Just try online.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. They don't
Yeah.
either the shop attendant
Yeah.
can't be bothered putting themselves out.
Yeah.
Or the owner of the establishment
Yeah.
doesn't want to be put out. I don't know which.
Yeah.
But if I end up phoning around various places, and I've used Port Lincoln as an example, just one example for that, just because it was Port Lincoln. I remember having to get something really urgently. It was my fault. And I rang up every town that I could think of that had one of these establishments in place I needed to go. We weren't meant for Spotlight, but it was. And I phoned up all the spotlights I could find telephone numbers for in South Australia. None of them had it, none of them had it, none of them had it. I ended up phoning one in Port Lincoln. She said, I'll go and check. She goes and checks. She was like, yeah, we've got some. I said, any chance you could send it off to Whyalla? Oh yeah, no problem. It'll cost you X amount.
Yeah.
It can be on the bus tonight.
Yeah.
You'll get it in the morning.
Yeah.
I went down to the bus station the following morning and I got what I wanted.
Yeah.
Now, why couldn't that particular store operator here in Wyala phone their head office or wherever and say, could you check with all the stores, blah, 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 get back to us? We'll organise to have it brought to Kira.
Yeah, yeah.
And then phone me up 2 days later and say, look, we've got it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that way I would have gone straight back to them next time I needed a something,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
widget. Now, if I needed that kind of widget again,
Yeah.
I was going to be phoning up.
Yeah. So maybe going back to
Ugo,
Ugo, sorry,
Sheila, Ugo.
Ugo's comment before about what can the community do and a little bit over here. Why don't you ring up the retailer head office and say, hey, I've had just a really poor experience at the Wyala Spotlight. I've got poor customer service. Have you done any training lately? This is what I would expect as a customer. Thank you very much. Start demanding more.
Can I just,
Can I
can I
yeah.
interrupt? The council as such can't tell private
That's
enterprise
right.
how to run their business.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so there's nothing that Justin or anybody can do
Yeah.
to go there and say, well, this is what our.
We can do some things indirectly. So through the likes of the EPRDA, so Regional Development Authority, and through Wyala Business and Tourism, through Business SA, we can facilitate for business training and support, and that could be anything from service delivery through to online services, through to running small business, through to expansion, through to HR advice for businesses. So there's support we can provide to businesses indirectly, but I think it comes back to a couple of the comments here and something when we talk about the city amenity, and we were having a discussion with the workshop with the councillors last night. And again, this is another 10 I'm going off, so I'm going to be very short. But as a community, for a long time, and maybe I'll change it, so I'll depersonalise it. Some of our council staff, I'll bring it internal as opposed to community, because that may offend some people. So within our community, within our council, for a long time, there's been sort of probably this view that close enough is good enough, and the standards of service that we've provided for a long time is here, and that's what we know. And if we keep doing that, that's okay. I look at the jetty as a really interesting investment. The council today had a decision to say, do we want a like-for-like replacement, and is a jetty, a like-for-like replacement, jetty replacement good enough? The council of the day said, no, we actually want better than average. We want better than norm. We don't want just a like-for-like replacement of the traditional jetty. The council of the day actually said, we want something better. And what I want to encourage all of you to think about is, how do we all both demand and expect better, but also to contribute to better? The subject of street amenity, if we've got people putting rubbish out on the footpath, so Kristen, if your neighbour's putting hard waste down the footpath, do you look at it and think, I wonder if they've actually booked that hard waste collection? Or I actually know the tenants, and I know that they're just dumped waste out there and they just don't give a shit. Do you just turn a blind eye to the fact that there's now illegal waste on, your next door neighbour's footpath? Or do you do something about it because you want better? You don't want your street to look, cluttered with litter. Mark, Dean, sorry, where did I get Mark from? Dean, given your background, you look at some of the buildings, particularly government buildings, and for a long time, and councils been in exactly the same boat because of the challenges, we've sort of accepted a certain standard and a level for a long time because that's all we could afford. And one of the early experiences I had coming in, and the infamous Beach Cafe, a lot of community put a lot of value on what they've got and the sense of potentially losing what they've got, even when what they've got is in some instances not that great. Beach Cafe point in case. why is the community not saying, we actually don't want a rundown beach cafe building that's, not delivering a particularly good visitor experience or residential experience. We actually want something more. And not just automatically saying, well, that's council's responsibility, council's got to do everything. But to your point, how do we actually empower and get the community engaged and actually doing things themselves? We have some instances where we'll get a customer request come in to go and remove a tree branch on a footpath. We'll go out to respond to that customer request and we'll find a stick on the footpath, and someone couldn't be bothered to pick up the stick and put it in that green bin. They put in a council request because they think, oh, that's on the footpath, so we'll just get council to do it. A lot of people don't do the equation or the association that if you ask council to do something, you're actually paying for the council to do something through your rates. The more you ask council to do, the more there's pressure on council rates, because to deliver services, we need people and we need, equipment and resources. So, the waste is a really good example, whether it's illegal dumping or just the simple thing of putting the simple thing, again, probably needs to be clearly correct. What should be relatively simple, put the right type of waste in the right bin. Don't go and fill your red bins up with green waste or vice versa. Don't put a whole heap of, batteries or things like car batteries into your yellow bin, because all you're doing is just creating extra cost and challenge. So, we as a whole community, and the WTF process, some work that Kathy's been doing around the thriving Whyalla and our community, is how do we actually get everyone contributing to a better future? I say better, not in the context that we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and everything that we've got is no good. I just want to put that out there at present, because there's a lot of really great stuff about Whyalla, and the reason why we all live and work here is that there's good stuff here. But how do we get better?
What I did about 10 years ago is to educate the residents. Just put it out there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know what I get not upset about, but what gets me is if somebody sees you clean your verge, they say, what are you doing that for? It's the council's job. But it's my house. I like to make it look good. And you look at them and they go, well, so that mentality is what we've got to change.
Take it as pride.
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of gone off and gone on another tangent. We're talking with the elect member group last night, so that's why I've taken the liberty of doing so. But you're right. Yeah. How do we get the whole of the community wanting and contributing to better? We all want nice, clean. That's a generalisation, but we all want nice, clean streets without legal dumping. We don't want shopping trolleys strewn all over our city, and the whole heap of things that we actually don't want. And I suppose trying to get back to some of the conversation before, what can we do as individuals? What should council do? Noting that as soon as there's a handballing over the council, there's no free rides. The illegal dumping issues, some people might think in their own minds, I'm just going to go and, chuck the rubbish over the back fence into the laneway behind, or I'm going to take it out to the outskirts of town and just dump it, because then I don't have to pay for the landfill costs for going to the rubbish dump. They probably think they've actually saved themselves money. But council's then gone and spent $220,000 going and picking up legally dumped stuff, which ultimately the ratepayers pay for. But they're not doing the association that what they're doing or not doing is actually contributing to what they're actually ultimately paying for when council sends out the rate bill. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to call.
Yeah, can I just quickly say, I've tried over years now to get through to the fact that we have our rubbish picked up on a Wednesday morning. Now that's every week. we have a road sweeper man go around, I think about once a month in our area. He goes round on a Tuesday, the day before the rubbish car. Why can't I have him go round on a Thursday once a month, so it's the day after the rubbish car? Because you can bet your boots once the rubbish man's been round on the Wednesday, there's stuff in the gutter, which could have been swept up.
Good suggestion. I said happy taking note of that.
I'll try, I've
Yeah.
phoned the council
Yeah.
100 times and
Yeah.
said, can you get in touch with the road sweeper man, ask him not to come down our street
Yeah.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
come down on a Thursday
Yeah.
or Friday.
Yeah. Good
Doesn't
suggestion. We'll wind up there. If anyone's got any other comments or questions or wants to talk more, there'll be some of us. That's here to talk to you. Some might want to disappear, but please feel free to chat some more. Please take the opportunity to provide the feedback. The purpose of these forums is to get your feedback. So jump online or come to the council meeting and give us some further feedback. That'll inform our decisions going forward. And with that, I'll bring the meeting to an end and thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions.
No worries.
Yeah.